Warada, wonderful to be with you this morning. Would you agree with me that problems associated with the environment, education, the economy, health and social care are interconnected problems? Yes or no? Let me hear your voice from the room. So I'll ask the question again. Would you agree with me that problems associated with the environment, education, the economy, health and social care, all of these are interconnected problems? Yes or no? I can't hear you. So, okay, I can see voices. I can see head nodding. So I take it that you've agreed with me. Would you also agree with me that systems leadership and collaboration moves you beyond managing the parts of the system to leading the entire system towards shared outcomes, as we heard earlier on? Yes or no? Yes. Oh, yes. I got a yes there. So interactive. So it's a real honor for me to be here with you to discuss the topic of systems leadership and the transformational power of collaboration. For me, systems leadership and collaboration is increasingly vital in today's complex world. So when you look around, so as you look around you, whether you look at climate change, whether you look at social inequality or technological upheavals, it is increasingly clear that neither a single organization, a single sector, nor even a single country can solve these challenges alone. The problems are interconnected, dynamic, and systemic. So you have had a beautiful introduction there to systems leadership and some real examples. And I have looked at a number of brilliance in Wales, which I'm going to come on to later. Systems leadership and collaboration poses questions, and it challenges us to ask, how do different parts of the system impact one another? It also challenges us to ask questions about where are the leverage points for change. And as earlier introduced, systems leadership, it is a mindset. It's a mindset, it's a way of seeing the world and systems and the leadership in a different way. Systems leadership and collaboration calls you to understand the relationship and feedback loops within a complex system. Beautiful illustrated a moment ago. Systems leadership is about the bigger picture, how various parts of the complex ecosystem interact, influence, and depend on each other. It requires you to look beyond your immediate sphere of influence and collaborate across sectors, collaborate across disciplines and communities to create sustainable solutions. So let me ask you a question. What have you noticed about leading in a cross-functional, systemic way? Just buzz at your table for a moment. What have you noticed about leading in a cross-functional, systemic way? I'm only going to give you 60 seconds. Okay. So continue to make some notes about what you've noticed, and I will carry on because keeping to time. It's important to understand that systems are characterized by interdependence. The parts continually influence each other. Systems leadership, the system is also characterized by nonlinearity. Small changes can have disproportionate impact. Emergence. New patterns and behavior arise from interactions, and so therefore the feedback is important. uncertainty, and complexity. The system's behavior is not entirely predictable. So today I will explore how adopting a systems mindset coupled with effective collaboration can enable you to lead more holistically, resolve deeper issues, and create sustainable positive change. You see, of course, I don't need to look very far because outside of Wales, because Wales has increasingly championed whole system approach rooted in systems leadership. The Welsh approach emphasizes collaboration among diverse stakeholders to address complex challenges within the society. Wales has built on principles of shared purpose, principles of collective responsibility, principles of open communication, and mutual trust. I'll repeat those. That Wales has built on principles of shared purpose, principles of collective responsibility, principles of open communication, and mutual trust. Welsh policymakers and organizations have kept a core aim to create sustainable, inclusive change by breaking down traditional silo ways of working. So, what is so outstanding about Wales? Welsh policymakers have used 3 key drivers that I have noticed, probably more, but these are, in doing my research, this is what I have noticed. Recognition that health inequalities, so driver number 1, that recognition that health inequalities, educational disparities, and social well-being are all interconnected. Key driver number 2, an emphasis on co-production, community engagement, and integrated service delivery. And key driver number 3, the Welsh Government's commitment to Well-being of Future Generation Act of 2015 embodies sustainability and collaborative leadership across public agencies. And so these drivers, as I looked at them, it reminds me of Henry Ford's statement. Henry Ford says, coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. So, why is the shift to systems leadership important? Just write that question down. Why is the shift to systems leadership important? It's important because traditional leadership has often focused on individual organizations or departments striving for isolated goals and siloed success. But as you agree with me earlier, today and in the earlier presentation, you have heard, and with real life case studies, you have seen that the most pressing challenges demand a different mindset, a mindset that is rooted in systems thinking. Now, I'm going to begin to unpack what I mean by systems leadership. As I've already mentioned, traditional leadership models tend to focus on individual organizations or departments, what I call siloed leadership, where success is measured in isolated achievements. Increasingly, however, issues such as public health crisis, economic inequality, and environmental deprivation are interconnected. They span multiple sectors and require you to think in terms of whole systems. For example, in Wales, mental health is increasingly viewed as interconnected with social care, education, employment, and housing sectors. Traditional silo approaches often struggle to address the complex, multifaceted needs of individuals with mental health. Let's look in education as well. So in Wales, and I will be corrected if I've got this wrong, in education, Wales has pioneered systems leadership by fostering cross-sectional partnership that integrate community involvement, health, and youth services to promote holistic student and community well-being. And I will follow with 3 outstanding examples in the education sector where there is pioneering collaboration for holistic development. The first example that I found, the Welsh Education Strategic Framework, I think you call it ESF. This framework promotes collaboration among local authorities, schools, health, and voluntary organizations to improve pupil engagement, mental health, and inclusion. It underscores a shared responsibility for learners' holistic development, emphasizing co-production with communities. And again, you in the earlier presentation, you saw some real live case studies there too that drew on this. So the second example is focused on regional consortia. Several regional consortia bring together local authorities, schools, further education, voluntary organizations, and private sector partners to coordinate resources, to share best practices, and develop innovative pedagogy. So these consortia, they work on projects like digital inclusion, mental health, promotion, and transition support, embodying systems-wide leadership. And the third example that I found, again, that is so outstanding in Wales, is it includes involvement with voluntary and private sectors, charitable organizations like Wales Youth Agency, and private providers are integrated into planning and delivery, ensuring tailored services are responsive to community needs and fostering shared ownership. So, from the examples that I have just shared, you can see that real responses to systems leadership and collaboration are important and bring added value. Earlier in the presentation, it was impressed upon us how important it is to have the narrative and to get the narrative in a way that people can understand it. So another example that I found pertained to, I could come and talk to you about collaboration here, there, and everywhere. But where you have good practices, and you have brilliant good practices in Wales, I thought I would focus on those, and then I can add a little bit later. Wales is outstanding. It doesn't mean that it gets everything right. It's doing good, and there is more to be done. So the Welsh government adopted a whole systems approach by promoting collaboration across education, criminal justice, health and social care, and community organizations. And in the collaboration, leaders have focused on understanding feedback loops, such as how housing stability impacts mental health. And as a result, leaders have identified leverage points like early intervention and stakeholder engagement. Don't quote me on this, but I think the English government could learn something from that when we looked at some of the problems that we have in the criminal justice system, etc. Anyway, the approach by the Welsh government facilitated integrated pathways, improving access to mental health services, reducing hospital admissions, and promoting community-based recovery models. These approaches exemplifies moving beyond individual organizational priorities towards shared systems, aiming for better population health outcomes, and highlights the collective intelligence harnessed through collaboration. And so I'd like to reflect on Ken Blanchard's quote that says, "None of us is as smart as all of us." Let me bring in my own example here. As you may know, if you do any Google work, research on me, you notice that I have had a long history with health services as a nurse, midwife, health visitor, health promotion officer, nurse teacher, university lecturer, 21 continuous years as a non-executive director, including 10 years as chairman of NHS Kingston, which is a primary care trust. Cut a long story short, there was a space within the history of the primary care trust where the trust went into financial deficit. There's another story to that, which I won't go into. But what I want to bring out here is collaboration. And it was at a point where we didn't actually want to have vulnerable people with mental health issues not getting the right care, and also at a time when people were being held in hospital in accident and emergencies on trolleys, etc., and didn't want that. Anyway, so we continued. So there was a £6 million deficit, and because we continued to give the service that we needed to give, and at the time of the financial resources, that if you found yourself in deficit, the English government added the NHS Bank added 10%. So over a year, a £6 million deficit became a £21.5 million deficit. Collaboration we used to clear that. How did we do that? Certainly health couldn't do it alone. And so it was the collaboration with local authorities, with the voluntary sector and some private sectors, but mainly with local authorities. Not teaching grandmother to suck eggs, because you know that in terms of financial reconciliation, the way that things are done in local authorities, how we treat the financial ledger is not quite the same in health services. And so what we needed to do was to have a joint director of finance who understood how to meet the legislative requirements on both sides. People says it couldn't be done, but we did it. And there's more. But what I want to impress upon you, that we were then, through collaboration, able to wipe out that deficit within 1 year, a £21.5 billion deficit wiped out and turned around to have a £3.5 million profit. And that was through collaboration. That was understanding the needs of the community and going back to the earlier session, getting the narrative right. Once you've got the narrative right, once you've got the goal, and you're working with integrity, none of us is as smart as all of us, and collaboration works. So I would like you to buzz, and I think somebody's going to put in the chat how much longer I have, so in terms of keeping to time. So buzz at the table for a moment, and what I want you to think about in terms of, I think the question is actually on your table. In terms of your span of sphere of influence, where might there be even more opportunities for collaboration in a systematic way? Just buzz for a moment. Pause, 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 pause. We'll come back. So this is just opening. It's a stimulating question, and more. You will have more conversations around that in terms of your span of your sphere of influence. Where might there be opportunities for even more collaboration in a systematic way? We'll come back to that and have more open discussion. So, as I've said before, that Wales has been a trailblazer in integrating health, social care, and housing services, driven by systems leadership that emphasizes collaborative innovation. So, I was interested to look at health services. So, integrated care systems here, ICS. Welsh health boards are progressively transitioning towards ICS models involving NHS organizations, and I recognize there are a number of participants in the room from the NHS. So involving NHS organizations, local authorities, voluntary organizations, and private providers. And it would be interesting later on to hear some of your discussions of how you're experiencing that at your level. So what we have with the ICS, the systems utilize shared data platforms. So data, the digital information is so important. Joint commissioning process, again, backed up with person-centered care, and Wales focus especially for the vulnerable populations like elderly and those with chronic conditions. Example 2, social services and well-being Wales. Again, taking forward the act that Wales had in 2014, the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act promotes co-production by empowering individuals and communities to take active roles in designing services. It requires multi-agency collaboration, emphasizing local solutions created within the partnership with citizens and voluntary organizations. I'm going to pause here for a moment, and I wonder who in the room who is involved with this would like to just share an experience. So there are roving mics. So if there's someone in the room who would like to just say a little bit more about the operational co-production of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. Anybody? If you put your hand up, because there are people who can see. Don't be shy. Come forward. Oh, yeah, I can see a hand up. So the roving mic. So just stand up and give some of your example, please.
Hi, so I'm a nurse, and for 10 years I managed a formally integrated health and social care specialist service, which meant that I was the single line manager for both social workers, nurses, doctors, physios, psychology, and we operated a fully integrated service. And for 10 years, it just delivered some of the best coordinated partnership working and joint working that I'd ever experienced in 30 years of nursing. And the reason it stopped was because we couldn't agree who should pay for care. And CHC has kind of dismantled joint working. So we get a lot of organisations committing to partnership working. And if you talk to organisations at any level, there is a full commitment to partnership working. But what there is a lack of is joint working. And what we're seeing now is that the who pays conversation has become so distracting to the level of care provision in integrated and partnership working that we're seeing people and clinicians particularly spending nearly half their time disputes and arguments over money and getting dragged into that rather than face to face. And again, there will be exceptions to that, but as a rule, CHC's probably been the one thing that's dismantled joint working in health and social care.
How interesting. And I'd like to hear from others too around this. And if I go back to, I shared with you and the experience of reducing the deficit. I joined health services in 1969. So that will tell you that I am pretty long in the tooth. And what I have noticed is that every successive government comes in and mess with the health service in terms of reorganization. And your healthcare in Kingston, when we reorganized, I remember fighting with the Royal College of Nursing because I had the knowledge that this won't last if we don't protect it. And we protected community services into a community interest company so that we don't have to fight around who pay for services. And it's the only health service organization in the London area that is not in financial deficit. So earlier on in the presentation that was given, you were asked to be bold. And sometimes you need to be bold and you need to stand up for what you know what is right. Any other contributions here, please, before I move on to example 3 in a voluntary sector role?
Thank you. I'm Cathy Augustin from Conwy County Council. I just want to absolutely echo what the colleague said just now. It seems down to money, which is such a shame. Also picking up on your point about a success story, one of the key things was having a joint director of finances. The other thing that we heard at the very beginning was potentially sharing budgets. So I work through a regional partnership board across the 6 counties of North Wales. It is very tricky to actually deliver. As a local authority with our budgets squeezed, cut, slashed, continuing care is a very big issue. We as local authorities take on those vulnerable people, and then in the background, we and at the health board are having conversations, very difficult, very ongoing, long conversations about who is paying for what. And in the meantime, the local authority is trying to set their budget while they are owed a huge sum of money that equates almost to 1% of council tax or 1% of our education budget, because we are subsidising the health board on continuing care for highly complex cases. So it is down to the money. We have very collaborative meetings. Everyone is very polite. They all want to share stories, knowledge, information, but not money. And that's where it's falling down, I believe, at the moment. I'm actually missing a WLG Social Care Network meeting, which is happening as we speak, but I'm here, which is more important for me today. But we meet regularly as WLGA social care reps with Dawn Bowden, Jeremy Miles, Sarah Murphy. We raise these questions and nothing gets fixed. So I'm raising it here. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. We have got to sort the money, and we need leaders who will stand behind the narrative of what is the best in terms of health and social care from a person-centered. Because if when the health service doesn't meet its obligations and you find that people are held up in acute services and costing even more. When we pool the money, we get better outcomes. 21 years in the non-executive roles within the health service has taught me that. You pool the money for better outcomes. If you don't pool the money and protecting little areas here and protecting areas there, in the end, it is a disadvantage and poor quality outcomes. So if you take nothing away from my presentation around systems leadership and the collaboration, is get the people who are at a very senior level to sort out how we pool the money for better outcomes. And there isn't a shortage of information. Public health has all the information. If we begin to look at the public health data and to see what is needed, and we address person-centered care across health and social care, we won't have such difficult problems. When we look in the example 3 that I was going to share, organizations such as Test Social Care or Welsh Council for Voluntary Action focus on facilitation of community engagement, information that informs policy development and support to co-design health and social care services by feeding grassroots insight into the decision-making processes. But when this grassroots information is fed into the decision-making processes, we need to agree that the pooling of the money is important, because sometimes you could get even better outcomes from if commissioning organizations were prepared to put even more into the voluntary sector. Let's think about some of the examples from COVID-19 and wonder if we have learned lessons. Now, you and I know that COVID-19 had an unforgettable impact. So let's give some attention to the cross-sector systems leadership response. The pandemic posed unprecedented health crises that required rapid, coordinated action across multiple sectors: healthcare, social services, local authorities, housing, education, and private sector organizations. What was the system response? You can discuss that at your table, but I'm going to put a few things into the pot here. Leaders recognize that interconnectedness of public health issues, social support, economic stability, and community resilience, that we all need to come together around this. In Wales, as I said, not always perfect, because there's still more to be done. But what you have done there, you recognize that sharing data and feedback to identify hotspots, identified vulnerable populations and resources. Leaders internationally then begin to ask questions. Where are the leverage points for containment and support? So that's a question we need to still ask wherever we are. And write this question down. Given the data that we have, given the economic circumstances, where are the leverage points for service improvement and development? Where are the leverage points for service improvement and development? And I'm looking now across education, social care, health services, and voluntary agencies. Where are the leverage points? I pause for you to think for a moment. So you have to make the reference to your frame of reference and the areas within which you were. Where are the leverage points? And if you don't know at the moment, it's the questions that we need to keep asking. Oftentimes we find ourselves in meetings for the sake of having meetings, rather than really focusing on questions like, what might we do differently? Where are the leverage points? I impress upon you that if systems leadership is about understanding the bigger picture, then collaboration is the engine that drives effective action across that complex web. No single entity possesses all the resources. No single entity possesses all the knowledge or authority to resolve large-scale issues alone. Therefore, collaboration enables you to magnify your impact by pooling resources. I say that again. Collaboration enables you to magnify your impact by pooling resources, sharing insights, and coordinating efforts. I recognize that we have different ways of accounting in different areas, but go back to the beginning of today. Once we understand the narrative and what we want to achieve, and we pool the resources, and we have the governance structures. I mean, there are different governance structures, but we can have shared governance that enables us to think through the issues and achieve outcomes. You see, individually, we are one drop, but together we are an ocean. And this then reminds us the power of unity in systems effort, that individually we are one drop, but together we are an ocean. So continuing with the outcome of collaborative systems approach, what I see in Wales, private sector organizations are collaborating for innovation and economic growth. Collaboration ranging from tech companies to local entrepreneurs are increasingly engaging in collaborative systems leadership initiatives, especially in economic development around smart cities and health tech. Is there anyone in the audience who can add some real life examples? It doesn't mean that you've got it all right, but give us some real life examples of the journey that you're on around the area of entrepreneurs and working with various different agencies coming together for innovation and economic growth. Anyone in the audience can add to that? No real life examples there? Yes? Okay, take the mic and please add.
Hello, I'm Chantel. I'm from Tiger Bay in Cardiff. I'm representing DARPL, Diversity and Anti-Racist Professional Learning. One of my grandfathers came to Wales in 1901. He was a magnificent small man who made lots of impact in our community. I was raised and nurtured in a 1 mile community that had me knowing and loving the world in the 70s in my childhood. And Mrs. Campbell took me by the hand to school. She was Mrs. Betty Campbell, head teacher at the time. They achieved amazing things for race equity in their lives, but they didn't have the opportunity for systemic approaches nationwide. And DARPL stands on the shoulders of what they did in our community. There's lots of people in this room who are working with us, and together I think we're moving like a wave in the ocean across Wales. So there's amazing work going on in anti-racist professional learning. I think that there's massive need for leadership to consider that. If we look at the whiteness in this room in leadership, it's a real opportunity for more collaboration, more capacity building. I think we're working with thousands of people in education making a difference because we're working collaboratively and because we have systems and support from Welsh Government. And Mrs. Campbell and my granddad, Saeed Abraham, didn't have that opportunity. So I think that working together is showing that what we can do. We've got very little resources, we've got a tiny team, but we have got an ocean of collaborators and partners. So I'd love to work with more people in this room. And I think we do have to think about the representation and missing voices in this room. It was fantastic to hear from you today. Thank you so much.
And are you, okay, and so to what extent is the Cardiff Capital Region adding value to the work you're doing? Please comment.
Yeah, thank you. I think that I mentioned that I'm a small person from Tiger Bay, a 1 mile community. Because we're working together, we're working with thousands of people across Wales, and that hasn't happened before. And the people who are meeting in collaboration are then going into a wider matrix of impact. Organisations across the tiers of education are working together. So I'm just seeing the opportunity for collaboration more and more. One of the problems is old systems. Old systems are not agile enough, and there's certain people we want to work with, but we wouldn't ask them to work unless we can find the funds for them to do paid work. And that's a problem because we can't always work with agile systems and procurement, etc. So there's lots of opportunity, but old systems need to be more agile, I think, and more collaboration with voices, diverse voices in our Wales is needed.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And is there anyone in the audience from the health tech innovation who can add to this collaboration? Or you may not be collaborating yet, but the opportunities is there. Anybody from within NHS Wales and universities into the... Yes, I'll shut up. You'll come in.
Hi, I'm not from NHS Wales, but I am from the third sector. So my name is Nerys Williams, and I'm a chief exec of a charity called Care and Repair. So the whole amount of work that we work is right across bringing housing, health and social care together. I got some examples of good practice from the health boards that we work with, and that is supported by the Regional Partnership Board and the Regional Integrated Fund. So 2 areas of work that we are committed to is working with GPs, GP clusters. So we're trying to change medical problems and dealing with the social problems to try and reduce pressure on the GP practices. I think the 2 areas of risk I would like to just raise, one is money. Third sector, we get 28 sources of funding from, including Welsh Government. The funding is all yearly funding. So my role is constantly chasing money and worrying about money and worrying about patients when we get to the winter, running out of money to be able to bring them home from hospital. And the second thing I would say is data sharing. So even though we have a lot of cross-sector work, fantastic work, we're not very good at getting the systems correct to actually share that data efficiently. Thank you.
Okay. Brilliant. And so there is the IQVIA, which is a portmanteau derived from the merger with Queenlessness and IMS Health, representing the combined strength of companies in clinical research. I will get more information to Debbie to share with you because there is some work happening, and the data analytics is so important. So the IQVIA is a global provider of advanced analytics and technology solutions and clinical research services to the sciences and industries, and it can support. Well worth making contact. What about transport and infrastructure? Anyone in the audience can add any value around collaboration around transport and infrastructure? Yes, I could see a hand there, so please.
Name is Shafi from DVLA. I'm not too sure if I'm qualified to say what I'm going to say because I've not been long enough in the organization, but DVLA has a lot of interaction with lots of other government entities like DWP, HMP, Ministry of Justice, and lots of other organizations around the country. I think the system leadership approach can really help and benefit organization like ours, where we can really sort of have a deeper conversation, where we have the pain points, the issues, to sort of share, as you said, resources, where required, rather than everybody working as, individual entities. So I think the system leadership makes a lot of sense in situations like this to bring in the number of diverse entities together for addressing common issues where the resources of different types can be shared. And maybe this is happening, I'm not too sure, but I'm just trying to highlight that this is the kind of area that I think system leadership is absolutely can help and benefit. Thank you.
Brilliant. So, and it's oftentimes, we tend to forget about the importance of transport and infrastructure, and, we mustn't. So thank you. So I will move on because unless there's a burning question here or a contribution, come in.
I just wanted to come in. Thank you. I found this really fascinating, especially as an ecologist, I suppose, by background. It's really cool to see that ecological thinking brought into systems like this. And I suppose it's a place where nature scientists and things who can sometimes feel out of place really have a time to shine because so much of that education is really embedded in this. The example to share is one that I don't necessarily work on, but my colleagues do. So I work in the Future Generations Commissioners team. And there's a program in Wales called Welsh Veg in Schools. So it's led by Food Sense Wales, but it's a really cross-organizational approach to how we get more Welsh veg on school children's plates. So that involves local authorities, Welsh Government leading the way with free school meals, local authorities, their catering teams, other catering teams, making sure that they're looking to buy that and how they procure food. And then wholesalers like Castell Howell, who I saw dropping off food here, working with wholesalers and with farmers and developing long-term relationships with those farmers so that the farmers trust that they can grow that veg. You know, over time, there was like a big, I think, and I'm looking at a shepherd, so I stand to be corrected, but I think there was a lot more veg growing and a lot more diversity in Welsh farming back in the day, and through a number of pressures, that changed almost exclusively to livestock. And now there's this, especially with the changing climate, this idea that you need to transition back a little bit from this dependence and potentially an overdependence on livestock to generating more horticulture and veg and what that looks like. But those farmers need support, and that's a hugely challenged industry. So they need support from buyers like Castell Howell to do that. And so Castell Howell, inspired partly by the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, is supporting that and really driving that forward with Food Sense Wales and this Welsh Veg in Schools program. So that's what I understand. And I quickly Googled a little bit more information, but they've got some really great accessible info online. So it might be something if people are interested in like real collaboration and what that's looked like. It's a great program for it. Thanks, diolch.
Thank you, because the ecology is just so important, isn't it? And brilliant examples. And any other burning issue before I move on? I can't see a hand, but facilitators within the room, if there's a hand, just give the mic. Okay, I'll move on.
Sorry, can I throw in a question on system leadership?
Let me take the question. Write your question down and don't let me skip it. I'm going to put in a little bit more input and allow time for broader questions. So you've given enough examples within the room as to why collaboration is so crucial in systems leadership. So let me summarize 4 points. Collaboration is crucial when creating shared understanding. Collaboration helps to align diverse stakeholders around common goal. And remember the start of the day, get the narrative right. So second point, collaboration harnesses diversity of perspectives. And you had some of that example within the room. Different sectors bring unique insights, innovations, and approaches. Third point, collaboration is an important building block to trust and relationships. You and I know that long-term change depends on sustainable partnerships. And collaboration enables adaptive solutions. So as the systems evolve, as we have a better understanding of the ecology within which we are working. And when I say the ecology, I'm thinking the meta perspective of the ecology from the geographic, the ecology from the political, the ecology from health, social care, etc., meta perspective. Collaborative networks can learn and adapt more effectively. So, embracing collaboration within a systems framework unlock numerous benefits. Firstly, Collaboration fosters innovation. When diverse perspectives come together, they spark new ideas that no single entity could generate alone. Secondly, collaboration enhances resilience. By leveraging the strengths of different organizations, communities, and sectors, you can better adapt to change and withstand shocks. Thirdly, collaboration creates greater impact. By that I mean initiatives that are aligned across the system amplify their reach and effectiveness, leading to even more meaningful and lasting change. In addition, systems collaboration builds trust and shared ownership. When stakeholders from different backgrounds work together towards common goals, they develop mutual understanding, they break down barriers, and they forge stronger relationships. This collective commitment increases the likelihood of sustained success, even amidst complexity and uncertainty. So if I were to summarize what I've just said, to summarize the benefits of collaboration, increase resilience. Systems are more adaptive when multiple actors work together. Point 2, innovative solutions. Combining different expertise leads to creative approaches. Point 3, greater impact. Coordinated efforts have a larger reach and deeper change potential. And point 4, shared ownership. When stakeholders co-create solutions, they are more committed to sustaining them. So the benefits of collaboration underscores the exponential impact of working collectively. And I quote Helen Keller, "Alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much." Alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much. So there is a question on the table which you may want to take forward during the day. And the question was, from your experiences, what are some of the challenges and barriers to effective collaboration? I am going to skip that and let you talk about that throughout the day, because I recognize where we are now with time, and I need to give space to have the question and answers. So let me explore some of the challenges and barriers to effective collaboration. And you may well add to that throughout the day. So despite the importance of collaboration within systems leadership faces significant challenges. And I will share with you 6 of those challenges. So 1, silo and organizational boundaries. Many institutions are structured to compete or isolate, not to cooperate. And I draw on Steve Jobs, no longer with us. He said, "Great things are never done by one person. They are done by a team of people." The second barrier, different goals and initiatives. Sectors often have conflicting priorities, funding models, or matrices. And this is where the very good examples that I have given you about Wales and how from the Welsh government perspective that collaboration is at the heart. It doesn't mean that we have you've got everything right, but it is built into the policies and structures. Third point, power imbalances. Large organizations may dominate, making genuine partnership difficult. And sometimes we don't listen well. For example, there are times when the voluntary sector doesn't feel it has the same voice leverage, as it were. So power imbalances. We have to iron out the power imbalances to get the things right. The fourth, communication barriers. Differences in language, culture, and approach can cause misunderstanding. So misunderstanding, misidentification can sometimes cause even bigger problems. Short-term focus, 5. Many organizations prioritize immediate results over systemic change. Short-term fixes, never mind the long-term. Fear of vulnerability, lastly, 6. Fear of vulnerability or sharing control. Some leaders hesitate to relinquish authority or share sensitive information. But against all that I've just mentioned, we need to understand that those barriers exist. And so therefore, like any risk management, we then ask the question, how do we mitigate these? And so we have actions to mitigate those. It is important to remember that collaboration strengthens the entire system. And you and I know the quote, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And collaboration is the chain's glue. So let me share with you now some practical strategies that have worked to improve the outcomes of collaboration. You have that on the table as what practical strategies have worked for you to improve outcomes of collaboration. I'll share some points and then I will open up to speak even more into these and to take questions. And Andrew is going to keep me up to date with how many more minutes I have left in a moment. Yes, thank you. So I will focus on 5 practical strategies for promoting systems leadership and collaboration. Firstly, create a shared vision, common purpose, and get the narrative sorted. Yes? So how do you bring the strategy into action? Creating a shared vision and common purpose and getting the narrative right. You facilitate meaningful dialogues where diverse stakeholders co-develop a compelling vision that aligns the efforts of all collaborators. This shared purpose becomes the North Star guiding decision making and collaboration. So how do you maximize your this? So you do this as you do in facilitated workshops involving community representatives, health practitioners. You always think of the policy makers as well as those who are delivering, local authorities, private partners, bring people together to co-create the vision. You ensure that the shared goals explicitly address complex, interconnected issues rather than siloed targets. And communicating the vision consistently across all levels reinforces how each stakeholder's role contribute to the collective aim. And I will share with Debbie a document which I found, and if we all are working towards that in Wales. And we know that the UK government places place-based approach for reducing health inequalities. And in their main report in 2019 and 2021, they highlight that local areas adopting shared vision experienced 12% reduction in health inequalities over 5 years, illustrating the collective purpose. But I've also seen some brilliant examples in Wales, and I will share those links. I didn't have sufficient time by the time I came across this document to do the full analysis on it. So, so in order not to misrepresent, I will just guide you to the link. So, secondly, we're talking about how to strategies to improve collaborative outcomes. So we said the first, create a shared vision and common purpose. Second, map relationships and feedback loops. How do you do this? How do you bring the strategy into action? You identify existing relationships. You work, and this is where working with systems analysts does help us, looking at information flows and feedback mechanism among stakeholders, the use of systems mapping tools to visualize how actions in one area, for example, housing, impact health and social care, education. So I found some examples of good practice. The Wales Intercultural Communication and Engagement Project use systems mapping to understand how community engagement impacts social cohesion and health outcomes. This visual approach helps local authorities and NGOs to recognize feedback loops, such as how social integration improves mental health, which in turn reduce demand for crisis services. Is there anyone in the room who can speak a moment to any interaction with the Wales Intercultural Communication and Engagement Project? No one in the room. So I would highlight that for you to check further. The Wales Intercultural Communication and Engagement Project. So in terms of mapping relationships, how might we maximize the mapping of relationships? Conducting stakeholder workshops, to map out dependencies and feedback loops, using data to identify leverage points, areas where small changes could create significant system-wide improvements, revisiting the maps regularly to adapt strategies as relationships evolve. And thirdly, establishing multi-agency governance and co-production structures. The multi-agency governance is important. You know, earlier when I talked about what I did in Kingston with collaborators and with the joint director of finance across the local authority and the primary care trust, we had to have, although each organization had its governance structures, we also had to come up with the shared governance, so that so while you have your governance that you in terms of your reporting line up because of the way in which the systems work, you have to have that. It's part of your risk management and all of that. You also develop that shared governance. So you set up dedicated groups, committees with representatives from the relevant sectors to foster shared decision making. And you embed co-production principles into involving service users. And this is so important because oftentimes we think about service users as an end result. Service users need to be in the governance, feed into the governance structure, using collaborative digital platforms to share real-time information. When I look back into 2006 and where we are now with data and shared information, it is so much easier now. So when we look at the Welsh National Health Service and its NHS led integrated care networks, ICNs, they're using co-produced models involving health services, social care, local authorities, and citizens. And these networks pool resources and share goals to improve care for vulnerable populations. Make an asterisk against that if somebody in the room want to speak to this later, because I'm going to come to the point where now we can take questions. So I leave that, I come back. So fourthly, foster a culture of trust and psychological safety. Trust and psychological. Without trust and psychological safety, nothing gets done. So how do we bring this strategy into action? We hold regular informal meetings. We listen, and we build trust. We recognize and celebrate joint successes. And we have to recognize partnership and take the power play out of it. We are equal partners, co-producing. Provide joint training and emotional intelligence. And look at how, when conflicts arise, conflict resolution. I make another asterisk against this. The Community Connectors program in Wales, and if someone is in the room who can speak to the Community Connectors program, emphasizes building trust between health professionals and marginalized communities by training community leaders to act as trusted intermediaries. And fifthly, align incentives and performance matrices. How do we do that? Again, we develop joint KPIs and we share data. So I'm going to draw my summary and use the rest of the time now for questions, as I can see now, 10:56, 15 minutes left. So to harness the power of collaboration in systems leadership, you need intentional strategies. I say that again. To harness the power of collaboration in systems leadership, you need intentional strategies. Firstly, cultivate the shared vision. Align all stakeholders around a common purpose that transcends individual agendas. Second, create platforms for open dialogue and knowledge exchange, ensuring that all voices are heard and valued. Third, develop flexible partnerships that can adapt as the system evolves and maintain the agility in the face of change. Systems leadership underpinned by effective pillars of effective collaboration, and those pillars are, I would say, trust, the foundation that fosters openness, vulnerability, and reliability. Communication, the bridge that fosters, that ensures honest, clear, and timely dialogue. Shared goals, the compass guiding efforts towards common purpose and outcomes. And listening well to various stakeholders and embed, again, starting off the morning, we talked, you heard the presentation, how important culture is. So embed a culture of continuous learning and reflection, encouraging stakeholders to learn from successes and setbacks alike. So I have shared with you examples from Wales, innovative projects and data-driven approaches that leaders can better navigate complex systems. And we have seen some of the challenges across health and social care. And you've heard how, from members in the room, that people are working in partnership. As I said, a lot more to be done, but there is a transformation of siloed efforts into cohesive system-wide collaboration that delivers sustainable, impactful improvements for communities and ensure that resources are used more effectively when we collaborate. So my final words are synergy. Remember synergy, the power that results from combination of two or more forces. And this highlights the benefits of collaborative energy and ideas. Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. I am sorry I'm not there with you in the room, because it was my intention to spend all day, but there we go. I've done the best I can within the circumstances, and it's been a real joy. While I take the questions that are outstanding and to ask for the two areas that I had noted, and ask if there are any examples in the room. Let me shut up and listen to you. Thank you.
Any questions, thoughts?
I have a couple of questions. First of all, Dame Neslin, thank you very much. It was an absolute delight to hear you giving insights into system leadership. I think I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else has as well. My first question is around the challenges you mentioned. And one of the points you pointed out was the power imbalance. I think in a lot of situations, probably in many cases, you will always have a dominant player, a dominant stakeholder, with probably offering more resources, whether it's money or just have a lot of political clout. I think my first question would be, how do you actually manage that, to be honest, because that's a real thing, That's my first question. And the second one is system leadership. Where do you stop, right? Does it have a boundary? Because you can just carry on getting people or stakeholders, as far as wide as you want to go. So should there be a boundary? Thank you.
Okay, so the very first question Remind me the question again. I had it and it's gone.
Power imbalance.
The power imbalance. It's the elephant that is in the room. You put it there. Because, there are times when there may be a dominant stakeholder, but the dominant stakeholder always need to begin to think about what is in the best interest of what we are here to serve. And there are times when one, irrespective of how much resources that one is putting in as a stakeholder, we have to come from the point of appreciation of what each brings to the table, each partner brings to the table. So, and I think we know this in so many different areas, it's the same issues that you have around issues to do with culture, issues to do with race, where there are issues around dominance, put it on the table and let's work out how we address that. And when things are going out of line, we have agreed ways of naming in very respective way, not in conflict ways, that, we become aware. Boundaries, you begin to think about what do we want to achieve? What are we here to achieve? You think about the whole person. Whether it's an educational issue, whether it's a health or social care issue, whether it's an economic issue, it's all about the person. Person-centered care, person-centered provision. And there are others in the room who may want to add to this.
We've got a couple of questions on Slido, if I can quickly ask, and we might have time for one more before we finish. I'm going to roll two of them together, and it's unsurprising it comes around budgets, which we've heard quite a bit about today. So pooled, I'll just pick this one. Pooled budgets includes pooling and sharing overspending. But the question really is, how can we create something you mentioned, which is the psychological safety amongst different organizations to realistically talk about money?
Yes, we just do. People don't like it, and sometimes we just agree and we just talk about there are some difficult issues here around money. If when you're going to pool a budget, you have to, so the local authority, so for example, in pooling, one of the issues I had to face was, how do I give reassurance to the local authority that the money that it actually puts in, it can actually show value for money? So what would value for money looks like for the local authority? And in terms of, so for example, I'll give you a real example. There was a time when there was discussions about whether health would pay for adaptations to homes. The local authority didn't have the money to put into all of the adaptations. And I said, absolutely, health will put its resources behind that, because somebody tumbles down, fracture a hip or something, just the ambulance alone to get that person into accident and emergency is a colossal sum. The hospitalization is a lot of money. So in the end, if we can prevent falls, the money that health will put into prevent falls, it's a no-brainer. To what extent have I answered that question? We have to talk about the real issues. and the long term, the bigger benefit. You have to see it in the round.
Great answer. Right, we've got time for one more question, I think. I think I've got the mic in the back.
Yeah, hello. I'm Dan Wood. I represent Natural Resources Wales as a biologist, and I'm sort of part of this. I probably told everyone in the room by now, but yeah.
We've got 3 minutes.
I've got 3 minutes.
Snappy.
I'll hurry up. Yeah, okay, got you. I've sort of noticed that like collaboration happens better like under sort of outside of the organisation I represent. Like I've worked with the NHS, I've worked with other charities. So my question, I suppose, is, you know, I think sort of the public sector is quite difficult to work in. It creates a lot of barriers. What do you think? What is your opinion on some of those? I know you've actually spoken about this in your talk, but what are some of the barriers that would make it easier for the public sector to connect? You know, we're all here, but will we actually collaborate after this event?
And we need to recognize that collaboration operates at various levels. It's not always about the leaders doing the collaboration. So with your example, you will find that you will work with partners across sectors. So you know we need to empower people to collaborate and bring it up. So leading from bottom up and leading from top to bottom. You know, it's that multifaceted way. We have got to say it's okay, and there are benefits. And again, it comes back to the narrative. We've got to give the psychological safety and loosen some of the boundaries. There were things that I didn't know how to do, and I brought people together across health and local authorities, and I said, I have no clue how we do this, but if you were in my shoe, what are some of the quick wins that we could have? Leaders have got to be able to say that they do not have all the solutions, and the solutions are within the system. Open up the dialogue so that you can get the contribution complete.
Brilliant. Thank you, Neslin, so much. I think we've heard a lot today about the benefits of collaboration, the innovation, the resilience, the impact, the share ownership. But your last but one example really showed truly how you can focus on the person at the end of the chain. But I'll just wind up the session with a huge thanks to Neslin, if we can just show our appreciation again.